welcome to Liminal Light, a show that explores the languages of myth and star, earth, sky, tongue, and spirit through weekly astrological forecasts. I'm your host, Chris. Enjoy. The invisible and ethereal lunar thread elusively slips through the eye of the night, and like a seed that grows a fountain, nestles its potential into the sky. We below and within the bosom of earth are for a moment a long dark night, adrift in the vacuum, with only stars as our map. Their stories reminders of where we've always been, and where we are always headed. In Caesura, rather than a stop, we curve with the cadence of the verse, and in this stanza, Luna comes to court with the king of day, in the tail end of Aries, and sun's exaltation. The pair sidle up to Uranus, and by the light of Prometheus's torch, they pass a silent moment, heads reflecting to the future rather than the past, and the hairs on all our necks raise as a volatile and frenetic tangent roots itself in the certainty of nowness. The long river beginning here with the crack from which a thin trickle of water may emerge into some kind of deluge later. The new moon is in a Mars-ruled sign, and the full moon it shall waxeth to is in Mars's other domicile. Mars is in exaltation in Capricorn, and Saturn, Capricorn's ruler, is with him. The sun is in exaltation in Aries, assisting Mercury now turned direct. Venus is in rulership in Taurus, and the moon will shortly join her. Jupiter is watched over by an exalted Mars, and is coming face to face with a dignified Venus by opposition. The time is ripe for picking stellar fruit, as the heavens are heavy with gifts. If you do not approach an orchard, its apples fall and compost where they land. There are things that are not delivered automatically, but which must be harvested. Mercury strides forward once more, Hermes in a slow yet steady chariot, slowly picking up speed. The revisions to the logic and language of our identities may now engage. The update is complete. We have installed the 2018 version. Time to take our self-expression and action organization out for a spin, and see what new things our identities can do, how and what we now think, and what kind of stuff we can say. This is an interesting Mars period that precedes Mars's grueling retrograde later in the summer. For the moment, we have a lot of initiation going on, a time to move our first pawns out and see how the world reacts to our openings. We are not charging out with swords, but building ourselves out of a box, assembling our ramps and bridges across as we go, setting up our strategies as we take our initial steps. We've thought things out as far as we can in our present situation. We must take our first shot and see what kind of circumstances arise, see what kind of trouble we might get ourselves into, or what kind of hungers we can stimulate to salivate, which appetites we whet, and who steps forward to engage in play and counter our maneuver. Mars comes from Vega as all this transpires, and Vega is a prominent star of Orpheus's lyre. So fittingly to the pileup of dignified planets and the abundance of ripe fruit swaying on the celestial branches, there is a suggestion of enchanting actions, getting things done not necessarily by plowing through them, but for the moment anyway, playing evocative melodies, singing in the right tune, and laying the right lyrics. As is the case with magic in general, the work you put in the mundane side continues to be mandatory, but you might be handed a pass behind the astral curtain. So consider your activities for the start of this week wisely, as keys will be distributed in the shadows of both Monday and Tuesday. On Sunday, April 15th, the conjunction of Moon and Sun occurs at about 10 p.m. EST, under blankets of stars, perfect for those who wish to wander to where the roads fork and pray in reverence, as well as for favors. The conjunction is tight against Uranus, lacing the cocktail with sulfur, gunpowder, or mystery substance, a certain experimental performance to begin the next sequence of events. try something new, you might make an important discovery. Your missile might far outfly its target, or just blow up in your face. But as long as you follow good laboratory procedure, all may end in eureka. Keep a notebook handy, and over the waxing phase, see how well your hypothesis fits the results. This lunation occurs in the third lunar mansion, Al-Thuraya, traditionally aligned for works of abundance, creativity, and success, whose greatest warning is indulging in too much of a good thing and being overly invested in material pursuits, a disclaimer echoed in much of the current configurations. Saturn's presence in Capricorn is likely to keep this all in check and keep our eyes from being bigger than our proverbial stomachs, maybe something typically symptomatic of the successful magician. The Picatrix also mentions as being a good mansion for alchemy and for all works done by fire, as well as beneficial in hunting in the country, so keep your stalking outside of urban areas. The third decan of Aries is often a face focused on performance and the passion that can kindle the hearts of an audience and draw their spirits into the heat of the fray. It's interesting that the new moon lunation might be planting of performative seeds that culminate in April 29th's full moon of primal hunger in Scorpio's first decan. A certain ramping up effect is likely, especially with Uranus's involvement, so don't be surprised if the flower you pot goes a little shop of horrors, and hopefully in a good way. On Monday, April 16th, the moon's ingress into her exaltation in Taurus at 5 a.m. sets off the period of auspicious elections, as it is traditionally required to have the moon in good condition for all serious petitions and talismanic operations. The moon is the closest planet to us, so we reside in the sublunar sphere, the world of physical manifestation, and as we watch the moon herself grow into manifestation each month, it is she that brings our works into being and allows them to manifest in our life. In Taurus, her focus is on organic rhythm and abundant natural resources, providing all the support we need to accomplish the work smoothly. Venus progresses into Taurus's third decan by 9 a.m., where the luxuries she's come accustomed to are realized to be not permanent, merely transient nectars. The precarious perch upon which blossoming abundance rests in agrarian metaphors, or even in hunter-gatherer modes, is partly what makes luxury luxurious. That all can be and will be ultimately lost only increases the savor of the flavor and the experience of the sensual, material and tactile pleasures all the more deep and urgent. Enjoy it while it lasts. This is not the mindset which leads to rationing, but rather making sure you thoroughly enjoy delicacies to their fullest while they are ripe and don't let their fruit spoil in neglect. Use them up. On Tuesday, at April 17th, at 1 a.m. Chiron completes his first crossing into Aries, ending a zodiacal cycle by contemporary conception and initiating a new revolution. Now core wound and overarching healing themes, more or less the main trip people will be struggling with, switches to the pain of being an individual, to be assertive, to follow impulses, take personal action, and be able to make the first move, to act as an individual rather than part of an inert or an ambient whole. This makes sense as the primacy of group thought and social identity safety has obviously emerged as one of the most sensitive debates in media and culture. The itch, rash, and reaction this will chafe into existence is likely to rear its head, and mostly be expressed in the next generation to be born with Chiron and Aries. This has also typically been thought of in the past as insecurity surrounding leadership, which raises more red flags in our current society. The sage among us will spend Chiron's time in Aries attempting to heal these issues for themselves and in ourselves, and once well, can turn to the world with cures. Chiron's activity is likely to be subtle for most of us, whereas Venus and Jupiter's opposition is more apt to make some noise. This is not to say that it is disturbing in the least. On the contrary, it is so pleasurable that the drinking, feasting, and general hedonism is likely to ensue, and perhaps in a big way. In her domicile, Taurus, Venus is perhaps the most concerned with material and sensual pleasure that she can be, and in full sight of Jupiter, who returns her glance from a place fabled for its activity of chasing satiation after satiation, there is likely to be more overindulgence than even a typical Venus-Jupiter aspect. The greater benefic attempts to find opportunities that gain wisdom from intense loops of satiation and the unearthing of hidden psycho-spiritual intensity. We may as well welcome indulgent excess in a positive way, but be careful of blowing our bank accounts or otherwise overdoing it. The benefic seesawing to balance is normally very pleasant, perhaps too much food and wine, and the Epicurean philosophy that accompanies cultured gluttony. Even when teetering out of balance, we get orgiastic feasts whose excesses are ultimately therapeutic, even if they send us slumbering like bears. For those of you that want to engage Mars and Saturn here, this begins the most benefic stretch for magical berry picking. Between the Venus-Jupiter opposition and the Moon-Venus conjunction later that evening at 6 p.m., you'll have more than enough time to bless your beds, brew your beers, etch your emeralds, and open your larders for the influx of fortune. We only rarely receive all the planets in such fortunate positions, especially on an initiatory newly waxing moon. You may feel too relaxed to motivate into action, but luckily it will be Mars's day, and the motor will be steadily running if you need a ride. Saturn turns retrograde on Tuesday evening at 8 p.m., which might serve us to stay out of the sauce after we've had our fill and remain disciplined throughout our operations if filling your celestial basket is what you choose. Either way, we should be able to lean against something solid in all this juicy fruit. Saturn retrograde is more of a tidal change and is not disruptive to its significations as it is for the inner planets. For Saturn, it simply focuses slightly more of his influence on the discipline aspect of his nature rather than restriction. It becomes about our fortitude, our ability to keep it together and remain tough in times of turmoil, tumult, or even distraction. The Sun conjoins Uranus at 10 a.m. on Wednesday, April 18th, and we may get a surprisingly early reaction from what we set in motion only a few days earlier. Suddenly, we might break from identity routines, receive revolutionary and inspired visions, experience epiphanies, lightning flashes of gnosis. When so much truth explodes into our life at once, it is sure to get turbulent, and as long as we arm ourselves with the flexibility of an experimental outlook, we can tread upon the lightning path, suddenly changing course as we progress, or even shape-shifting entirely, from one identity to another in rapid self-discovery. Don't be surprised if some mirrors shatter along the way, and be prepared for technological updates to reveal themselves, as many will be whipping out new inventions on the bleeding edge just after their first few sips of coffee. On Thursday, April 19th, we very quickly move from the fast to the slow as the Sun ingresses Taurus, and our focus settles on planning and preparing for general fecundity. We lumber across the field with heavy yokes and saddles to heap on oxen, bulbs and mules that help us harness the grounding energy as the time has come again to plow and fertilize the soil, build up beds and move materials. This is indeed slow labor, but not necessarily grueling, just moving steadily one step at a time. Outlooks and projects switch pace after the frenetic surprises, like an exceptionally warm day that ushers in spring weather overnight, and before you know it, you're wielding a hoe and wheelbarrowing compost. In a sort of sleepy daze, money, food, and stuff become vital. Stores have been exhausted over the long winter, and it's time to begin building back up our stockpiles. For those in the cold north, it'll be nice to get our gardens going, and for those in more balmy climes, the hotter weather moderates the pace. On Saturday, April 21st, most of what transpires over Saturday involves the moon, so it doesn't portend any extended period, but certainly gives the day a particular flavor, most of which is presented by Venus's application to the fixed star Caput al Ghul, known in other times as the head of the ghoul, or the Gorgon's head, the head of Medusa. Originally, the Gorgon was only a head, a terrifying, bodiless entity from more primordial times. and Medusa's voluptuous physique, a later invention, nearing the assimilation of gods into togas by the Olympian period of the polis. The myth of her decapitation by Perseus, concocted to explain to more rational city dwellers why she was simply an infernal screaming head. The Chinese refer to this star as Che Xie, which means piled up corpses. Others saw her as Lilith, the first wife of Adam, that fled paradise and became a demon. Earlier tribal cultures accepted more readily this dark current of the feminine divine, the unfiltered and dangerous source of female kundalini energy, that which both creates and destroys, as nature itself, which provides sustenance and shelter, but is also infested with serpents and is stalked by predators. There is passion here, the poisonous passion of datura and mandrake, which arouse but easily catch you in a coma if you take too much. The active ingredients in both plants are tropane alkaloids, whose effects are dissociative, and it is algal's intention to return you to a more primordial era of existence, to the snake cults that preceded the Indo-Europeans, to a divine feminine powerful and beyond morality, dangerous and inspiring and total. Venus is aesthetic and beauty, and so it is this nature which we might find most attractive and alluring on Saturday. As this is still Taurus and a place she rules, so it is part of her nature, even if it is on the far end of the spectrum. The moon is our moods and our emotions and our stream of conscious thoughts. So where she finds herself on this day suggests where we might feel like doing. At 2 a.m., Luna opposes Saturn. Needs, emotions, nurturing, rest, and moods are forced to find an equilibrium with discipline and clearly visible foundational responsibilities. Broths and bombs that obviously oppose austerities and obligations must be balanced out. By 9 a.m., Venus conjoins Algol, and it is Kali and the Morrigu which become beautiful. This is reasonable enough on the surface, and it's best to just embrace it, but also it is capable of causing turbulence in relationships and personal lives for those more unfamiliar with this energy, as the more sensitive can succumb to the wiles of the nightmare and the succubus, released from the dream. Later that night, around 7 p.m., the moon opposes Mars, and our R&R must compromise with decisive maneuvers and stratagem action. Then, finally by 10:30 p.m., she opposes Pluto, this time placing fears, the depths of mystery, the crossing of thresholds, and that which is beyond the beyond, in the sights of restorative requirements. An interesting combination and a very provocative one for those on the poison path, or in pact with hot spirits, or devoted to dark female deities. I would be a hypocrite if I insisted you go easy here, but whatever is on the list for the 21st, have plenty of cooling substances on hand, and stay hydrated. Okay, welcome back, Bonnie.
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
Happy Sunday.
Yeah. I guess we're laughing because we don't record on Sunday, but it is Sunday as far as your ears are concerned right now.
So we have a really nice week astrologically coming up.
Yeah, the first half of it, and the second half is nice too, but the first half is where we get a lot of our really excellent elections, which is just worth paying attention to and mentioning, as we don't often get so many planets in dignity like this all at once, which I've gone over in the past couple weeks forecasts, but might as well run through them here right now. So you have Saturn in Capricorn in rulership, and then you have Mars in Capricorn in exaltation. And as far as Saturn work, that's having Mars with Saturn, it doesn't really strengthen it. If you're going to try to do something directly Saturn-y, having Mars there brings some interference and kind of disturbance. Like it makes the signal like filled with static, or like it's too active for to properly be like cold, dry Mars. But on its own, Mars is exalted there. So just as far as like picking elections, you're like, oh, all the planets are doing great, you know. So you have Mars and Saturn, both in dignity in Capricorn, and then you have Venus in dignity in Taurus. And the moon, just the reason why the beginning of the week is great is because the moon goes through Taurus on Monday and Tuesday, and that's the moon's exaltation. So she's co-present with Venus in rulership, and applying to conjoin Venus at 6 o'clock on Tuesday evening.
Mm-hmm.
And so you need the moon traditionally in good position to make petitions, like really like involved petitions or actions, you know, like magical workings, that astrological magical workings. But especially if you're going to make some sort of talisman, or if you're going to make, you know, you're going to make Venus oil, or you're going to make like you're going to brew some beer, some Venus beer, like say like Damiana beer or something. You need the moon in good condition, and it's great to have her in exaltation because that's her earth, that's her earth dignity, where, you know, you're bringing something into manifestation. When we watch the moon wax in the sky, it's growing and becoming, you know, and like and the sign that the moon rules, Cancer, has a lot of themes surrounding like childbirth, you know. And so you're like giving birth to this action. And so it's really great to have Venus there and the moon there, and then you have the malefics in dignity, and then you have the sun in exaltation, and that's in Mars's sign. And so Mars is in dignity in Capricorn, and he rules the sign that the sun's in. The sun's already in exaltation, so that's great. And then Jupiter is in a Mars-ruled sign, and he doesn't really have great dignity there. He doesn't have anything like wonderful going for him, except for the ruler of Scorpio, Mars, is in dignity. And then the sun is in a Mars-ruled sign. So, but the other thing that makes it really great this week is Venus and Jupiter form an opposition. So then you also get that the Venus in rulership having a full view of Jupiter across the zodiac. And then Mercury doesn't really have anything special going. It's peregrine, doesn't have any dignity.
Out of retrograde.
But it's out of retrograde in Aries. And so now Mercury's it's a, you know, accidental dignity, not essential dignity. So Mercury's very strong because he's moving very slowly, because he's just turned direct. So it's a lot of Mercury. He doesn't have any dignity in Aries, but he's co-present with the sun that's exalted. And then the ruler of Aries is exalted in Capricorn. So you have Mercury and Jupiter just supported by these other factors, and then you have the rest of the planets in excellent dignity. So those 2 days are just filled with elections. There's a couple like the best ones, and then there's a bunch that are workable. And so it's a good time to plan all your magical activities, which, like I said, if you're a full-on magician and you're ready to make some talismans, you could do that. And that pretty much just the only definition between someone who's going to do something at a good election and someone who's going to really do something magically is having access to or being ready to do conjurations and, you know, to like whatever a magician does, whatever your practice is. Casting a circle, doing conjurations and things like that. But if you're not doing that kind of stuff and you still want to take advantage, you can just use these timings to initiate something that you want to be filled with Venusian character.
Or create something, like you said, with beer, or if you make even just infusing oils. Making medicine. Oh, that'd be nice for the lunar aspect.
Yeah, especially
and that new
medicine.
Moon, we have the twin doctors.
Right.
In that lunar mansion.
By the Vedic. The Indian astrological mansion. Yeah, and that's the other aspect.
The Cosmos and Damien of India.
Right. Totally. Yeah. Which before we started recording, we were discussing. Cosmos and Damien are the Italian saints, you know, that they have a folk patronage, and they're twin doctors that were martyred for healing pilgrims on the road, you know, to pilgrimage sites. And but you get these.
Were they? What? Why would you? What did they? Was it their method of healing that created that had them?
I believe that it was just like Roman pagan devotees, you know, and then like early Christianity. They were Christians, you know, and martyred for the teachings of Jesus, motivating them to look at all men as equals and heal them, you know.
Yeah.
But they did a lot of urine analysis. It was a big part of their hagiography, which is interesting.
Yeah, I don't really read too much about that in early literature.
It was a big deal in like the age of Paracelsus and things like that.
Yeah.
You know?
So it was like the cutting edge science.
Mm-hmm, yeah, like
they were taking advantage of
biological chemistry and stuff like that.
Interesting.
But yeah, we were remarking on how interesting it is that in all these mythologies you typically get these twin doctors, these twin healers, you know. And that one way that I think about it, obviously it's Mercury, you know, the double, the dual, and the twin aspect, but you also get a lot of mythologies about this early brothers or brothers and sister sometime, like the primordial twins, like the first twins that
808.
Yeah. Shout out. And then having one needs to be sacrificed, you know, and that's like how the universe is incepted. There, you know, that like there needs to be that tension and that like sacrifice to begin the whole cycle. But because there can't be action during perfection. And so when the twin doctors come, it's almost like a representation of that original perfection comes and is able to heal and bring things back to equilibrium because they're initially flawed by that first sacrifice, you know. So that's just kind of a big aside there, a digression, but you do get that with the lunar mansion that the new moon falls into in Indian astrology. And it's a different connotation. It's a different mansion because of precession of the stars. And when you convert into Western astrology, it's like 2 mansions over. And in that mansion, it's a really good time. You know, it reflects this also like supports these elections and this being a great couple days for these magical actions and just positive initiations of things you're doing. As that it's a good lunar mansion for abundance and success and all kinds of business, and it's pretty benign and friendly mansion. Some of them are like, do this, but definitely don't do that. You know, this one,
a little more open-minded.
Yeah, much more mellow. It's also a really good one for alchemy, which is interesting when you think about the twins. You know, it's like that 2 becoming 1 or 1 becoming 2. That it's a good mansion for any works done by fire, and especially alchemical works. And then it's also good for, it mentions in the Picatrix, for hunting in the country, which I think is funny that it's not hunting in the city, you know?
Yeah. Also that it's not hunting season.
Right.
Oh, well, I mean...
Yeah, right.
Got to be something.
It's not, you can't legally do your hunting right now, but
though it's a good time to do it, yeah.
But it is interesting that I saw this one article about vegans protesting in Toronto. This restaurant seems like it's a venison restaurant or a wild game, like kind of centered restaurant called Antler, you know, like one of those kinds of titles, like Eat or something, you know. But then, the chef's last name is Hunter, which is insane. Wow. And then he finally they were really affecting his business. And finally he got sick of it, and he brought like a deer leg out to the front window and butchered it in front of the protest, you know, in view of the protest. And then that started a counter protest, you know, where people are like, it brought attention to it, and people that aren't vegetarian are like, this is ridiculous. You know, you can't just shut down this restaurant for having meat, because it's essentially like his whole ethos is like sustainable carnivore restaurant, you know, which I'm not taking a side one way or the other, but it's just an interesting topic that we'll want to look at that. And I'm going to see how that progresses in the next week with this mansion that is good for hunting in the country, but perhaps you shouldn't. That implies don't do your hunting in the city.
Yeah, stay away from it in the city.
The one thing that I really fixate. Well, I guess I should continue talking about give these times for elections. So, whip out your paper and pen, everybody. So, I don't really have these written down in order, so I'm just going to go through them as I have them listed. So, there's a couple different options you can go with because the Sun, Mars, the Moon, and Venus are all in good dignity. And so you can do Tuesday morning at sunrise, and that's going to put the Sun, obviously, right on the ascendant, and the Sun is in Aries, and that's Mars's sign, and Tuesday is Mars's day. Mm-hmm. So right off the bat there, and that puts Mars really close to the midheaven as well. So that's a really great election for starting business ventures or anything that you want to have that solar martial quality where you want to get attention, you want to get ahead, you want it to like work, you want it to be like a good maneuver, a good chess maneuver. It's something you're doing, things you're striving towards. It's like what
like exercise goals.
Yeah,
like
exercise
fitness,
goals.
It would be a really good time to begin a new fitness.
Mm-hmm. Health and vitality, confidence. Any of these things, power,
Yeah, I've been, this is a small aside. I promise not to go too deep into it. But we went to go see Steve Byers talk about, we went to the TikTok, and at the TikTok, he said that vitality is the number one preventative of Lyme disease.
Yeah, that's the solution.
Mm-hmm, and so I've been really thinking about that and like ways to increase your vitality. So with that in mind, this Tuesday morning election could be used to strengthen that vitality because we are going into tick season.
Yeah, totally. Start your optimum health routine. Mm-hmm. Like you could make your tinctures then, knotweed, astragalus, bone set, or you could also, just
do ticks,
jot down your plan, right then, make your initiate your serious plan or take your first step of your plan. So that's when you began. Be like, yep, that's the moment that I began my ultimate vitality routine,
mm-hmm.
And if you're savvy with magical operation, you can take that all the way. There are things you can do. You can find in multiple sources. If anyone's familiar with the PGM, that would be a good day to do the consecration for all purposes, which is like a Helios consecration of a talisman.
That's the Greek magical papyri.
Yeah, right. The Greek magical papyri. But plenty of other stuff. That's when you could throw down your Orphic hymn to Helios. Or any. You can just. I think, you can just, if you're already into this stuff, you can find your magical prayers and petitions and planetary petitions and do them then. But also you could just, if you have a piece of gold around to inscribe on, that's a time to inscribe like an image of your desire, whether it's for business or vitality or authority or confidence, onto some piece of gold, or just anoint a piece of gold with olive oil at that moment would be good, and burn frankincense or bay leaves. So you can Google these planetary correspondences. Planet correspondence. One good source is the website renaissanceastrology.com, which is Christopher Warnock's website, and there's I believe Agrippa's and William Lilly and some other famous astrologers, Renaissance astrologers and medieval astrologers, lists of correspondences are there. So if you're like listening to the show and you really want to go for it, I'm going to lay down.
Just browse. It's a wonderful website.
Yeah,
absolutely.
It's very extensive. And he's one of the people that translated the Picatrix with John Michael Greer. So that's your solar Martian election. That's Tuesday 17th at sunrise, which for us here in Maine is going to be 5:49 a.m. And then on the same day, you could push that. Let's see here. What am I trying to show? you on the same day, later on that evening, you can also do 6 p.m. and that's when Venus and the moon can join. And I think a lot of people are going to go with this one, even though it puts Venus and the moon in the 8th house, which doesn't put them in a prominent house. You get Libra on the ascendant and Cancer on the midheaven. So you get the signs they rule on the primary angles, and you get in the moment that those planets can join. And then you on the 4th house, which is like the foundational house, you get Saturn and Mars both in dignity. So this is a great chart. You got to adjust that for where you're at, but those are what you want. So about 6 o'clock in Eastern Standard Time on the 17th is going to get you a good chart. But that chart is good not for solar workings, but for Venusian or lunar workings. Mm-hmm. So that's going to be more wealth, abundance, pleasure, relaxation, feeling good, like feeling healthy, love, sex, attraction, and you probably want to go one way or the other, go lunar or go Venusian. Mm. And so if you're going to go lunar, you could use silver, you could use mushrooms, melons, coltswort, pearl, quartz, if you want to go, and just water, you just cool water. And if you want to go Venus, you're going to go with copper, emeralds, carnelians, malachite, vervain, all kinds of fruits, lavender, anything aromatic and sweet smelling and sweet tasting, honey. And for that one, you want to, it would be helpful to get very feminine, put on some makeup. The colors are green and rose, or anything light, like with the moon, anything pale colored, but with Venus, rosy colors and all greens, as green is like the oxidized color from copper, and Venus's metal is copper, and that's really easy. You can just get a piece of copper and then engrave upon it, something that's looks like your desire, or a word of your desire even, and if you're more magically inclined, there's plenty of sources that you can find, and the easiest one, like we said, is you can just look right into renaissanceastrology.com and find a bunch of stuff and take it from there. Or if you have access to the Picatrix, that'll give you plenty of weird ideas.
Seemingly impossible.
Yeah, if you're unfamiliar, they are really weird. I think there's like a Mercury, the moon in Gemini election where you sit on a throne made entirely of gold and cut off the heads of 8 goats, after you do this other thing, and then you burn the meat and you distribute the meat to your friends or something, which sounds insane now, but it was
written in different days.
In 900 in Spain, I was describing to Bonnie the other day, you'd be sitting at your house looking out the window, and if there was a window, whatever that is, the window at that point, but just sitting around, and there'd probably multiple times a day there'd be a goat herd walking by with a whole group of goats. It's quite an operation, expensive to get 8 goats together and do that, but it's not as absurd sounding as it would be today.
No,
not that we we're not suggesting animal sacrifice. We're just saying
at all.
In the 900s,
that's what they did.
It was much easier.
Yeah, I mean, it was all part of something larger.
Yeah, different paradigm.
Exactly.
Yeah. So, that's one of the Venus elections. Another one you could go for is just Monday the 16th at 7 a.m. And then that puts Venus on the ascendant. Venus and the moon are in the 1st house, and that's not in the hour of Venus, which the hour of Venus would be at sunrise on Monday. But you could on sunrise on Monday, you could say a prayer or a petition to Venus, and you could burn incense for Venus and get all your Venus gear together. And then at 7 a.m. is when you get the good chart, and that's when you make your talisman or do your thing, you know? Like you could spend like from 5:49 until 7 in Venus devotional prayer and meditation mode. And then at 7 o'clock, you could like turn on your stove to start brewing your mead and start dissolving your honey. You know? So things like this. So, and if this all sounds overly complex, those 2 days are just good days in general to do something, to start something, or that's going
to declare love.
Yeah, to declare love and start something that's going to work out well for you.
Yeah, take care of yourself.
There's so many planets in Dignity Monday and Tuesday that it's a good day to start something. But the problem is that that Venus and Jupiter opposition is going to make things just feel real good and make you just feel like indulging and just like you're like, I feel great just hanging out. Why would I do anything? You know? And so you're going to have to kind of tap into Mars and Saturn to like turn on the like it's go time, you know? So a lot of people just miss it. I think in the forecast I described it as there's an orchard with fruit, and you know, if you don't feel like having a piece of fruit right now, you're not going to get up and get it, but then you're not going to have a whole basement with barrels packed with apples for the winter, you know? And because the sun is moving into Taurus, and we're going to start thinking about you know, starting our gardens and making money for the summer and refilling our larders, and that this is a really good opportunity to do it. That a lot of people might have a great day but miss the opportunity to like start things that are going to work out really well for them over the course of the next season, in the next year, or in their life, depending on how big the project is. Yeah,
you can think about what was lacking this winter and try to remedy that, or planning to remedy that
today, and then do it tomorrow.
Yeah.
As far as like, because this broadcast on Sunday.
Right. Yeah.
So, yeah, there's that. If you have any questions and you know who I am, give me a holler.
DM me.
Yeah.
For details.
So one thing I really fixated on is something that occurs on the end of the week, and that's because I really like this star and its story, which I kind of sounds like if you just listen to the forecast, maybe I made more of a deal out of it. Like I talked about this as much as I did these elections, and so this is maybe not as big of a concept, but it's really interesting because you get the moon in Cancer on Saturday, making all these aspects to Saturn and Mars and Pluto and Capricorn. So that's something that's happening now every month as the moon goes around. She's in Cancer in her rulership, should be feeling really good, but also very sensitive, receptive, and emotional. And it's like when she goes through Cancer, it should be a time that we like rehydrate and rest. It's like that day, like 2 days where you just are doing your most rest and relaxing. But when she comes through there now, she opposes Saturn, and that's going to go on for the next couple of years, the next 2.5 years. But this time, now that like Mars is there, and of course Pluto's there as well, but just that it's like another aspect that Mars is there, she opposes Saturn, Mars, and Pluto right in a row. And so that happens every month until Mars moves along from Capricorn. But on this day in particular, that's when Venus is on Algol, which is, as I described in the forecast, Kaput Algol or Ras Algol, depending on which, the former is Latin and the latter is Persian, or Arabic, is the head of the ghoul, or the head of the demon, the head of, which is the Gorgon's head, or the head of Medusa, which, before Medusa had a body, the Gorgon's head was just a head, and it was the, Athena wore that head on her aegis, on her like sash across her toga, most famously in the clash with the Titans, in the war between the Olympians and the Titans. So she's facing that, what we famously know is that Medusan visage at her enemy, so she's wearing the Gorgon's head talismanically, whereas the Gorgon's head on its own portends disasters, like, for instance, with the agrarian metaphor of Venus in Taurus, like the destruction of your crops by blight or hail or something like this, you know.
It made me, when you were talking about that, it made me think of a image I saw today of, I forget who it was, but it was some celebrity, and they were wearing a Versace belt, and it had the Gorgon like as a belt buckle. And so, you know, she's just walking down the street in Rome or something and has, you know, is flashing this to everybody who sees her, which is such powerful symbolism.
Yeah, that's it right there for sure. I definitely recommend certain people to that I read for to make a talisman of the Gorgon's head if they have a certain configuration around it, like they have an affinity to it or they have a problem with it, like because it protects against what it protects against its own action. You just have to learn to turn it the other way, you know? So yeah, it was interesting because that you mentioned Versace, right? And you pointed out earlier that it's their logo.
Yes.
Yeah. And that
and how Donatella has been coming up in the news. An I don't know who did it, but there was an interview with her, and so she's just been more of a spotlight on her. So I think Versace's just a lot of press on Versace. I guess it's probably because of that movie that came out about the murder of her brother.
Yeah, and that's also like with Al Ghul's stuff, you'll get murders and often decapitations, which is wild because it is like a decapitated head or just a head, you know, like a screaming infernal head, you know. So someone that has Venus right on that degree is Princess Di, who is famously decapitated.
Oh, yeah.
know? And also her Prince William has Venus on that degree as well, which sometimes you see a lot of like from mother to child with it too, because it's this like who else? Yeah, like Debbie Reynolds had it, and her daughter is
Princess Leia.
Yes, Carrie Fisher, who's played Princess Leia, you know, and Debbie Reynolds' first husband died in a plane crash. When you get, that's one of those Al Ghul disasters, and then she was in the tabloids, which sometimes with Venus and Al Ghul, you get like destructive gossip or just relationships getting destroyed. You know, you get like we were saying, Donatella Versace has Mercury very like relatively close to Al Ghul, and that's in her first house. And then her brother Gianni Versace has his descendant right on Al Ghul, and so the descendant's like the seventh house, like the other person. Which in this case, you're like, oh, maybe that's Donatella because they have their house systems flipped. And then she's obviously has quite a visage, you know. And then so other people is like Johnny Depp has it, and so if you think about like Edward Scissorhands or Jack Sparrow, both characters just have these crazy heads,
wild hairdos,
yeah. And then so you also get Sid Vicious has Venus on Al Ghul, which is like
another wild hairdo,
and so similar to Edward Scissorhands, you know. You get the French photographer, and like he was also a balloonist in the era of the beginning of the hot air balloon. His name was Nadar, and he was a famous caricaturist. So he did those drawings of famous people with big distorted heads, and he was friends with Charles Baudelaire, who was like very like that Al Ghul, like return to the like wrathful feminine kind of vibe. You get the director filmmaker Alejandro Amenabar, and who his first three movies, La Cabeza, Hymenoptero, I said that crazy, but and Luna literally mean the head, the head and insects and the moon. Like the Hymenoptero family is like the family that ants are a part of, you know. So that's like very clear, you know, making art of this Al Ghul kind of story. And then you also get Nikolai Gogol, who wrote The Nose, about his like insane visage, mostly the nose. And then other kind of like screaming heads. We get Eric Burdon, Billy Joel, and Debbie Harry.
Oh my goodness.
Which are like if you Google any of those three people, you're going to see some Gorgon's heads.
Yeah.
And then also Bruce Campbell, from like Evil Dead and those series of movies, who literally pretty much just fights like screaming Medusa head like monsters nonstop in those movies. So it's a really interesting star, and it'll be cool to watch. Hopefully no one loses their head literally. But
I thought you meant like loses their cool.
I did mean that, but like
then you thought literally.
Yeah, that was my pun. Yeah. But so that's just Saturday. That's just like this one day, Venus,
and it's kind of fleeting, isn't it?
Mm-hmm, yeah, Venus is going to move right past it. I mean, it'll be close enough over the couple days. That's why we're already seeing like Donatella Versace might be coming up in the news. But just keep your eyes peeled for the Gorgon's head, and then the moon is just like in this perfect kind of like broody, like kind of screaming Gorgon's head kind of mood, where she's going through like, I really need this, but I'm looking right at both malefics and then like the darkest, most mysterious, powerful planet. So it'll just be interesting what you do on Saturday, which I was kind of saying, the good magic you do on Monday,
can help you on Saturday.
Can maybe help you on Saturday, or it'll be an interesting mood change to be doing your kind of like very positive works, and then maybe your like very infernal works on Saturday. Maybe not like Malefica and curses directly, but the more kind of like hedge crossing, darker witchcraft kind of spirit work stuff would be very appropriate on Saturday, but could get really frightening, but if you're into that and you're into like facing those fears and going beyond those barriers, and harnessing those talismanically and trying to turn them different directions, it's just more magical opportunities packed into 1 week. So for the people that are more all about this stuff, you might want to whip out your ephemeris and try to figure out how to do some algal talismans on that day.
Incredible. So we have Saturn going retrograde this week. You want to talk a little bit about that?
Sure, yeah. The thing about the outer planet, or not the outer planet, like not the outer planets like Uranus, Neptune, and Pluto, but the planets on the other side of the sun, is that when they go retrograde, their retrograde cycles are very different than Venus and Mercury and Mars, which are really disruptive to their significations. And they like go on either side of the sun, and they slow down and they change direction, and they do all these weird things. Really, like Jupiter and Saturn, it's more like a tidal motion. They're retrograde for, I think, Saturn close to 6 months a year, and Jupiter close to 4 months a year. So they're retrograde half of the time. So it's more like the tide going in and the tide coming out. It's when they get the furthest away from the sun, and then the closest to the sun, and then the furthest away from the sun, because they're moving slower than the sun. Much slower. And so with Jupiter, which we discussed recently, it's like when Jupiter's direct, you're growing and expanding, and when Jupiter's retrograde, it's more like the wisdom and coherence part of Jupiter, where you're just trying to understand what you've grown into, or that's what you should do if you're like in line with what Jupiter's trying to do. And with Saturn, you get all that like restriction and like building. But you also get like building and stratification and stabilization and architecture. And when he's retrograde, it focuses a lot more on, it's much more subtle with Saturn, but more on like the discipline side of Saturn. Like it's a time to just focus on your discipline and just to remain disciplined, So it does highlight a part of the zodiac. And so if you're thinking about mundane astrology and predictive astrology, that is worth looking at. Or if you're in like a Saturn return or a Saturn perfection, that is like, you're like, well, this is the part of zodiac he hangs out in for a very long time, because that's where he turns around in and goes back, because he'll hit the same degree 3 times. Mm-hmm. And so that's worth looking at, but that layer of the story is like much more complex, or it can get much more detailed. Sometimes there's stuff there, sometimes there's not stuff there. Sometimes it's a grueling thing that's happening. Sometimes it's like a highlight of something that's going on. Like if your sun is there and it's going back and forth over your sun over and over, you know?
Yeah.
But for the world in general, it's just kind of, it just puts a parameter over topics, which for this cycle is Saturn entered Capricorn in
January?
In December 19th.
Oh, right. Okay.
And then he's made it all the way to like 9 degrees. And then he turns around and he's going to go back to 2 degrees and then go back and proceed beyond 9 degrees. So it's that like between 2 degrees and 9 degrees story. So that puts it mostly in the first decan of Capricorn. So it's like, you could just say this whole era is very much about territory, like, and the laws of territory and it's like that whole Capricornian like hierarchy, strategy, building, construction thing. But only in the second decan do you get into like building monumental works and things like that, big building. In the first decan, it's kind of just like, here's the plot we're going to build. This is why it's better than that plot, and we're going to hold down this territory because this is where we're going to do our thing. Mm-hmm. You know? So it just is in those stages of the Capricornian cycle and story.
How long is Saturn in retrograde for?
I don't know the exact date, but it's usually around like between 4 and 6 months, I think.
Wow.
And so, yeah. Well, we're pretty much out of time. And so I just rambled for 45 minutes. I hope you enjoyed it.
I enjoyed it. I hope you enjoyed it.
Okay. And I hope you take advantage of these elections, and if not, just to take advantage of feeling really great and
do something fun.
And yeah, be careful.
Don't overeat.
Yeah, don't be careful of overeating, and be careful.
Or no, just overindulgence in general.
Be careful of overspending. That's like a really good signal if you're
happy.
If you realize you spent more than you usually do, like by Monday afternoon, you might want to watch out. And
save those receipts. You can always return it.
Totally. Yeah, good. Yeah. I guess we're going to end with that tip. Thanks very much. See you next week.
Bye-bye.